Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life is wrestling.
Welcome everyone to a very special edition of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with Cody Deaner, as we continue in our tribute to an amazing man, Jesse Scott. On May 7th, 2024, our friend Jesse Scott passed away after battling a rare form of cancer. Jesse leaves behind a wife and 3 handsome and energetic young boys. He was a son, a brother, a friend, a professional wrestler, a wrestling promoter and company owner, and as we learned last week, a man who had a rare ability to spread positivity, confidence, and joy to whoever he interacted with. Wrestling fans will remember that positive energy anytime they saw him enter the ring under the name JT Playa, or the Lord of the Bling, Tiberious King. In today's episode, we want to continue to hear stories that give us a glimpse into the authentic man that Jesse Scott truly was. This is episode 52, our 1-year anniversary of this show, and I can think of no better way to celebrate 1 year of this show than to celebrate the life of my friend, Jesse Scott. A man who saw wrestling as more than just a way to entertain people. We learned last week in the stories that we heard that he was someone who saw the value in everyone that he communicated with. And he saw the valuable life lessons that the world of wrestling could teach all of us. So we're going to hear more of that today. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I encourage you to go back and listen to last week's episode where we heard from 6 men. We heard stories from Andrew Davis, Jackson Jarvis, Ben McCulley, Tornado, TJ Harley, and Eric Young. All different, unique, yet wonderful stories that showed us how special of a man Jesse Scott was and showed us the powerful legacy Jesse leaves behind. Today, we'll hear from more men whose lives were affected by Jesse in their own unique and positive way. And as we hear from these men, we'll get a glimpse into who the man Jesse was at various stages of his life, whether that was his life as a father, a young man who decided to start a wrestling promotion early in his wrestling career, a booker who saw the unique skills of each wrestler and wanted them to shine, an in-ring performer who could light up a room like no other, a teacher and mentor who trained other wrestlers to prepare not just for life in wrestling, but for life itself. And we'll hear about his final days before his death, and how despite the excruciating battle that he was facing, he maintained his sense of humor and positivity until the very end. We're going to start by hearing from Jake O'Reilly. Jake is an over 20-year veteran of the professional wrestling game. He's an Ontario indie wrestling veteran who has wrestled for TNA Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, and also been a booker for one of Canada's top independent wrestling promotions. He's accomplished many things in wrestling, and he got his start in professional wrestling with Neo Spirit Pro because of one man, Jesse Scott. So let's hear from a man who was friends with Jesse for over 2 decades. Let's hear from Jake O'Reilly.
All right, Jake O'Reilly, I asked you for a Jesse Scott story.
Yeah.
There's a lot that are out there.
There's a lot that involve karaoke in Nashville.
Oh, yes.
That we can't really talk about here.
No,
but
those like to stay in our heart forever.
Unbelievable how we lived through some of these nights. But
yes,
I'll tell a kind of a clean wrestling story. Jesse and I have a mutual love for Japanese wrestling and Great Muta being my favorite. And he'd be Tenru, and he'd just randomly start doing and start crawling over me, slowly chopping me, getting harder. No reason. This is in public. This is at a restaurant anytime.
Oh, yeah.
So we wrestled that style for years, and then we became old men, and we decided, you know what, it hurts too much.
Yeah.
Let's not drop each other on our heads anymore.
Yeah. Let alone not in public. Let's not even do that in the ring.
Yeah,
like,
no.
Whereas when you're young, I mean, you'll do a head dumper on the sidewalk
as much
needed.
as much as possible. Head dumpers anywhere. Gas station head dumper, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is we're not doing head dumpers. We
Okay,
decided it's not happening. It's a tag team match. I think it's they were called Black Pepper, so it was him and Pepper Parks.
How did I not even know this or remember this?
Yeah,
what a wonderful tandem.
Yeah, beautiful. Like the Blade and Black Pepper. So
I love it.
It was Darko and I, the Piss Beaters, and we're in Niagara Falls, and we're gonna have a good Memphis brother match.
Yeah,
no problems. Walk and talk. Nice, easy style.
Yeah.
And anyone who's ever wrestled Pepper knows when he chops you, he puts his hand through your chest into your soul.
I've been
So that also
I've been on the receiving end of a soul leaving chop from him.
It hurts so bad. There's a picture of me wrestling in some bar where his hand is like in my body.
Oh yeah.
Somehow. That sounds dirty, but it was like inside my body.
Yeah. Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So not only am I not trying to get dumped on my head by Jesse,
yes,
I'm also trying not to get killed by Pepper.
Yeah.
So I figured it's a win-win. Darko does everything anyway in the match, and I'll just come into Memphis it up.
Yeah.
JT, listen, Jake, whatever you do, don't dump me on my head. I do kind of want to take a German, though. Like, it's kind of veering from the path, but sure, no problem.
Yeah.
So we get in, and this is something Jesse and I had. This mutual love of wrestling, but also we're both maniacs. And as soon as we get in the ring, all the Memphis is out the window. We're beating each other senseless. I sneak around. I do a little duck behind, grab him in the waist lock. Immediately, the first thing in the match, right on the top of his head. Immediately, like, just paralyzed. Why? He's lying. Why? Fuck, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Got up, did it again.
So a lot of times I listen to stories from people and like try to like, what does that story say about Jesse? And I think that says a lot, but to you, does that like exemplify any specific thing about Jesse as a man that was about him? Whether it's a character trait or something revolving around wrestling, like what is that?
I can tell you, I don't know about him as a man. All I know about him as a man is one of the most perfect human beings I've ever met in my life.
That's right. Agreed.
But our personal relationship always was taken to the excess, not intentionally. But whenever we were around each other, it just kind of brought out the best or worst, depending on the night, in us.
Yes.
Right? So it's like...
Interesting, yeah.
One of those dudes, you know, I have buddies like this, and I'm sure you do too. You're like, oh, come down for a beer. We haven't seen each other in a while.
Yeah.
Jesse and I would... Yeah, let's have a beer after the show, and then I'm going to go home. And then we'd be in, you know, Karate Man's pool in Geese at 4 a.m. because we drank 2 bottles of rum, right?
So with the safety and pleasure with friends, it's all good.
Yes.
And with Jesse, I think, I'm so glad that you said that because everything was in excess with him. But I also think, to take that a step further, is Jesse was a type of guy that lived life to the fullest.
More than anyone I've ever met.
There it is.
Yeah.
And so whether that was, hey, I'm with my buddy tonight. We're not just gonna have one beer and call the night. I'm gonna spend this entire evening with my friend, and we're gonna create some stories.
Yeah.
There's that. There's also, hey, we have this opportunity to be in this match for the next 20 minutes. We could, quote unquote, Memphis brother it up and like never remember it.
Right.
Or we can create a memory and dump each other in the head and do it to the fullest.
Yeah, immediately paralyze each other.
That summed him up, though. In a lot of ways.
And I want to be clear when I say take stuff to the excess, not in a negative way at all.
No,
in a super fun, loving. Every night you'd end the night with Jesse in a big hug, laughing on his big chest like a little kid, just, laughing my ass off, loving every second of it.
So whether that was, you know, drinking one too many beers together or taking one too many head dumpers, like you feel the love, you feel the happiness, and he was somebody that everybody to a T that I've talked to, it's all almost different versions that all circle back to the same thing.
Yeah.
That he was all about putting smiles on faces,
Yeah.
living life in a
Yeah.
positive way.
Yep.
He always brought out the best in other people.
Everything.
And everything that he did. And like I think, like you said too, like one of the most perfect human beings I've ever met.
Yep.
In more ways than one. I have countless Jesse stories that are the same. I will say that I can 1,000% relate to that story, and in that I had to wrestle him in a main event where it was like a tournament where we'd already wrestled like 2 times already, and we didn't have any time to talk about our match or what we were gonna do, and it was all the same thing too. Like, hey, we'll just go out there. It'll be really easy. Yeah, man, it'll be
For
easy.
sure.
We're both sore. No.
Nope.
No, it was immediately
Impossible.
to like, hey, I'm going to give you an exploder suplex. Yes, you are. And
Of
then
course.
there it is. And then it just started. Oh, superplex? Sure, superplex.
Yep.
Dive? Yep, dive.
Yep.
Like, we did everything,
Yep.
and it was awesome, and it was wonderful, and it was with my buddy. I'm going to miss him very much. He was just... I can't even talk about him without laughing.
Yeah,
and smiling
whether it
about
was
him.
having a crazy wrestling match or watching the news, it would be fun with Jesse,
That's right.
no matter what.
Oh, man, I love it. Thank you for sharing that story.
Thank you, man. I love you.
I love you too, buddy.
Next up is notorious TID Chris Tidwell. Those in the wrestling business affectionately and simply refer to him as Tid. Tid has been a wrestling personality for 30 years. He's been a professional wrestler, producer, trainer, guest on multiple wrestling television shows, and he hosts a plethora of wrestling podcasts, including wrestling podcasts before wrestling podcasts were even a thing. He's an OG in the genre and someone who has worked alongside Jesse Scott in various capacities throughout his career, including working for Jesse's various companies, doing color commentary for Neo, or stepping into the ring with his friend of over 20 years. So let's hear from Tid. Let's hear from Notorious TID.
All right, Notorious TID. I would love to hear a Jesse Scott story from someone that knew him for so long and knew him in multiple capacities, both as a friend and someone who worked with him alongside him business-wise. You said you have a Jesse story. I have no idea what it is. I'm very excited to hear what it could be.
I mean, there's a ton of Jesse stories, a lot of which will go down in infamy and only be spoken without microphones.
Exactly.
As you know, right? But that's the nature of the business. But I'll give you one here on the type of person that Jesse was. Jesse was always the kind of guy that wanted everybody else around him to do well. He was a very good cheerleader, and by cheerleader I mean leader.
Yeah.
Because at every one of the shows, Jesse would always be the guy to, get everybody fired up, give those speeches before the show would happen. Get out there, do your best. We're going to have a great one. It's a great house. Everything is coming up roses. This is fantastic. And he's doing one of these before a show, and he's so fired up about it. And everybody's gathered around. Everybody can feel it. It's like, yeah, this is going to be a great night. And as you know, it was like, Neo on 3, right? 1, 2, 3, Neo. And he does it, and he throws his arm up in the air and completely blows out his shoulder.
I remember that. Oh, but I totally forgot.
And he's got this look on his face like, no, did that just happen? Had to pull himself off of his own show.
Amazing, because he got so fired up with his pre-show speech.
Up.
Oh, man.
But that's the kind of guy that Jesse was, right?
Yeah. He was the guy that, like, it's funny because he was the guy that was willing, if he needs to be the butt of the joke, he will. If he needs the show ass, he will. If he needs to, like, kind of whatever needs to be done to put you at ease, but also cheer you on, get you thinking positive things. And as you're saying it, any wrestling fan that's listening to this that isn't familiar with Jesse, but to give it a good context, anybody that saw the documentary Wrestling with Shadows and saw the Paul Heyman speech, right. The famous,
on the stairs,
talking to the ECW boys and getting them fired up. Jesse Scott was the Paul Heyman of Ontario independent wrestling.
1,000%.
Right?
And more so in the speeches, in the stuff that he would come up with, the crazy ideas, right? Like the fact that he pitched to me an idea where because I was working as a monster heel in the company, and we were doing some show, it had this balcony, and he's like, "You think you could hang me off of that?" I'm like, "Jesse, let's think about this for half a second. Could we please?" It's like, no, it'll be great. I'm like, "No, we're not."
No. And if Notorious TID has to be the voice of reason,
bro, I wanted to get out of the town alive. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, I love that. I mean, he was the word that you use, cheerleader. I've asked a couple guys like if you could sum him up in like one word, maybe to you or to in the context of your life or in the time that you spent with him. I think cheerleader is a really good one. And you also said not even emphasizing the cheer.
Yeah,
he was also
the leader part.
He was a leader,
right? And that's what made him so great.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
is that he could lead, but his leadership wasn't anything overpowering. It was I'm going to empower you to be the best you can for me.
Yes,
it's great, and that's what makes a great leader.
That's what it is. He empowered people, and I don't think that's done enough. And he did it out of love, both for the business and the people that he worked with. He was if you were on a Jesse Scott show, and he said this as part of every one of his speeches, there's a reason you are here. Yeah. You're not here by accident. It's because you are the best of the best, and you were here, and he would make you feel so special and empowered that you would go. And he did this to when Neo came back just a few years ago. I've been wrestling 25 years. I have a herniated disc in my neck. I'm like broken, and I want to take, and anyone knows me, I'm not punching my bump card unless if I have to. I want to take 50 bumps tonight because he made me feel like I can do that and I'm going to be okay, and that's what the fans deserve, and then I'm special because I'm here. He could make anybody want to frickin' jump through a wall for him and his company, but that was not because he's guilting you into it, not because anything other than he's actually empowering you to feel that way about yourself, and that is a very, very, very unique and special character trait that he had.
It's the greatest way to ensure that your legacy is going to live on, because the more you do for others, they're going to do for you when you can't anymore, and that's where we are now. That's right. Right.
Well, that's a good way to end there. That's a perfect way to. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you, brother. I love you.
I love you.
Next up is Tyler Turva. Avid listeners of this show might remember the last time my road wife, Tyler Turva, was on this show as my guest. You can listen to those conversations right now in the archives by going back to episodes 40 and 41. Most of Turva's wrestling career has been spent wrestling for or with Jesse Scott. Many of his first matches ever were against Jesse. He's learned a lot over the years from his friend JT Playa. So let's hear now from Tyler Turva.
All right, so I'm sitting here with my road wife, Tyler Turva. Asked him, "You got a Jesse story?" He's like, "Oh, I got one that involves an abdominal stretch and Jake the Snake Roberts." I'm like, "Tell me no more. Let's wait till we got the record button hit and the microphone in hand, and you can go from there." So I'm very excited to hear this Jesse story.
All right, so I guess we gotta set the stage.
Yeah, let's set the stage.
So the old long drive up to Timmins. So knowing Timmins, it's always gonna be packed. Crowd's always gonna be hot. And then
so long drive. Let's tell people this. Like, this is 10 hours.
Yes.
Right. Like, this is a 10-hour drive on the day of the show. So you're gonna sit in this cramped car and then go do this athletic, crazy performance after 10 hours of in a vehicle.
And there's snow. Like it was one of the ones where we had snow. So like it took. It was like your full 10. Like it wasn't like, oh, we made good time. Yeah. And so you get there, you're tired, you're exhausted, and then I didn't know who I was wrestling. Find out I'm working Jesse. I was like, okay, sweet, this is gonna be fun. And then we're working the opener. I was like, sweet, even better. So I'm I was the bad guy, and Jesse's the baby face. So
Yes, he was.
So yeah, so we get rocking. I remember it like being, everything's going so good. It's like super smooth, and then I noticed like really early on in the match, I like look over, and the guest that night was Jake the Snake. And so Jake the Snake was signing autographs before the show, but because we were on first, he stayed sitting at his table because he was still like doing the runoff of his line because he had a massive line.
Of course, yeah.
So I remember like we're not even at the heat, and I look and I'm like, oh shit, Jake Roberts is watching my match with Jesse.
Yeah.
And so and it's going on like it was already once I noticed that, like we were already super fluid, flowing, like everything was really good. And then
You're already at a 10, and now you're like, oh, there's Jake. We're cranking her up to 12.
and like normally you'd think you'd get nervous, but it was the other way. I was like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Especially like knowing like I always had really good chemistry with Jess.
Me too.
So like
Very much so.
So like you just like you've just dropped in. Like you're like this couldn't be better.
Yes.
So it's like perfect setting.
I love it.
And then I remember like I get to the back end of the heat, and I hook Jesse in an abdominal stretch, which is always like I hate taking them because it's so uncomfortable for me because I'm not flexible enough.
Same. I hate them. They suck.
But I hook it. I think he went to go for like a hip toss, and instead I just like blocked it and then hooked it in right there. Yeah. And then all I see is Jake Roberts' thumb slowly go straight up in the air, and he gives us a thumbs up. I'm like, holy shit. Like Jake Roberts, like one of your childhood heroes, had his figures mid-match. It gives a thumbs up, and I was like, oh man. And then in my head I was like, shit, we still have the whole back end. Like, okay, like he's giving us like a premature thumbs up. I remember Jesse, the ref, like I have my hand on the ropes cheating. So the ref kicks my hand. Jesse gives me big hip toss, runs his comeback. Everything's going good. And then the finish was he actually hit the springboard clothesline.
Hell yeah, he did.
And we've always had like some of those rings are so shoddy whenever we go up in Timmins. So, but thankfully it was perfect. Like he hits it 1, 2, 3, place goes nuts. Jesse wins. And then like what was so cool is that intermission hits. And so my table was at the complete opposite end of Jake's. Okay. But there was like 7 tables. Like it was a really big show that night. It was. And I want to say there was probably somewhere around 700 fans, but Jake already had like 20 or 30 people in his line, and he walked all the way down to the other end, and he shook my hand and he said, brother, you guys had an absolute banger of a match. He's like, keep it up. And then he walked back.
Wow.
Yeah. It was like, whew. Yeah. And like that's all, like I remember Jess putting most of that whole match together. So in my head I'm like, oh, I just connected all of the dots that he put out. But like it was, literally like it was so cool. Like for me, that's my most prized wrestling possession is that match, because like once you've gained the respect of the boys, I feel like that's what we search for all the time. But also like Jake Roberts is also like one of the best to ever do it.
Yes.
Like it's not just someone else on TV. Like it was just like, no, like that was like the guy in the peak.
Yeah.
So like that was, oh my God. I have goosebumps even talking about it right now.
I'm doing this for like 25 years. I don't mark out a lot, you know, and get like goosebump fanboy type stuff. There's a few guys that I do, and Jake's one of those guys. Like, and I've had the pleasure of being in the ring with him and getting to meet him and like talk to him as a man and have him watch one of my matches, and I had a very similar thing where he watched my match and praised it, and then also got to wrestle with him. There's nothing like it. But I just said this to somebody. I was doing an interview with somebody they're not in the business, and I told them like how special it is when you share a ring with a guy, and like
you're literally risking your life with them, and they're risking their life with you, and then you immediately become friends because you wrestled. Even someone that you might not even like in normal walk of life, because you've now wrestled them, you have this connection.
Yeah.
But then you can get to that next level of connection where you have this chemistry with them that you can't even explain. You just have it with some people. You and I have it. Don't know why. We just do.
Yeah.
I had that same connection with Jesse,
Yeah.
and you said it in passing there too. Like, you had this thing with Jesse that I can't even explain to people. I can talk to you right now, and you can smile at me, and I can smile at you, and people are listening to this. They don't know what we're smiling at. They don't get it, but we do.
Yeah.
We got to have that. I'm so grateful. I was just telling somebody a story about one of this special match that I got to have with Jesse that was entirely called in the ring. Didn't even talk before, and it was like the best match that I had in a long time, and my favorite match that I had with Jesse, and I'm very grateful I got to have that. But now I'm jealous of you because you got to have that with Jake Roberts watching it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I know that would have meant a lot to him too. I can only imagine, because he's like that old school wrestling fan, loved it. Like, he was always about telling stories.
Yeah.
So like to have Jake,
Oh,
bro.
it was, yeah. Like, it's still so cool. Like, this is like 10 years ago. So like, Jess had that match with me like somewhere around like my 5th or 6th year too. Like,
Oh man. Okay.
so like,
yeah.
like I remember at the time, like, I was confident, but like not that type of confident. And I remember leaving that match, like, definitely, because I've now worked Jess a couple times at that point, and that definitely, I remember just having a different type of confidence, especially now as a heel.
Yeah.
Because my couple early ones with Jess were as a baby face, so like, he's more in control and helped leading me through. Where like, yeah, it was really cool.
So what I'm doing with some people's stories is, as they're telling them, I'm realizing like the life lesson or like character trait of Jesse's that is so exemplified within that story, and you just nailed it, is this confidence builder. Jesse was that to so many people. And sometimes it was a literal like sit down, heart to heart. You listen to me right now. You are amazing. You are an awesome human being. You're so good. You need to do this. You need to do that. And you're going to ascend. And like, he could make you feel like you're invincible.
Yeah.
Or it could be a match where he's not even saying anything. He's just having this kick-ass match with you. And because of that unexplainable thing that you got to have and experience, now you're getting yourself to the next level. He was that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Myself included.
Yeah. And I like, he's so many times, because like, I even went a couple stretches like when he toned down his wrestling schedule in certain parts where like I didn't see him for a year or two.
Yep.
And then it was neat, like, show up at, I think he was at a Crossfire show, and like came through the curtain. He's like, bro, he sits me down. He's like, that was so fucking good.
Yeah.
Right. And just like, and he's in his wrestler voice and just feeling it. And he's dropped in like to be able to like give you like the same critical feedback as if he was on the other side.
Yeah.
And
cool.
it was neat. Like, I remember him telling me, he's like, there's so many things that you do so well. He's like, but you need to highlight this. And like, and then then he's breaking it down. Like, he's like, when I look at you, I think you're like, you look like a party boy. Like you're like, but you're more like Gronkowski. Yeah. Like, he's like, like you're that kind of guy that like, when you get a touchdown, like you're going to spike the ball. He's like, you need to tap into what that thing is. So it wasn't just like, it was never like general feedback. No. So it was cool. It'd be like, it was nice. He's like, hey, your clothesline sucks. Don't throw a clothesline ever again. I'm like, perfect. Yep. It makes like, there's not enough friends that don't do that. Like that don't do that to you. Right. But like with Jess, like he would like cut out so many months of process. So he'd like help me navigate like, oh yeah, don't do that clothesline because you do these 7 other things so well. Like, highlight those things. But then he's tapping into, he's like I thought I knew who I was, right? Like, you're mid-20s, you're like, I think I know who I am. But then when he's like, you're Gronk, but like, you just have to have your own way of how you'd spike the ball. I was like, holy shit, like that is so simple. But like, like so simple on paper. But then like knowing what I know now, I'm like, that, like, it's poetic to say something that specific, to someone
and poignant and specific, and bang, you just nailed it in a sentence.
And then you're like, how did you know that from watching one of my matches versus like, I got to live all my matches and I don't get to see these things about myself. But he like, he just,
his wrestling IQ was through the roof, man. His wrestling IQ was like next level.
Fuck.
Yeah.
So good. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry all the time, but like, you just like, I miss those parts.
Yep.
Yeah,
like, but we have those, and that's one of the things that I've loved about sitting down here and hearing these stories. Like, I'm able to like see all these special things that he was to people, and there's all these common threads, right? Like that really show the type of character that he was. But the neat thing, I'm kind of realizing this right now, as I'm getting to this process of talking to these people, is like, you know, the whole cliche of like someone's legacy can live on forever, you know, through other people. Like, it's a cliche, but with Jesse, we get to see that maybe cliche sentence come to life because his hand was in so many of our friends' careers and development that like we will never fully grasp the impact that he had on us just within this thing that we love in wrestling.
Right.
And then also, but then you take that a step further with us that we're really close friends with them, like the impact they had in our lives. Like there's things that we're going to do in our lives that will make a really good decision down the road, or make a decision that we didn't think we could do, but now we have the confidence to make that decision because Jesse instilled that in us. Yeah. That's very special and very awesome that we have that. Yeah. And those are the things that I choose to focus on, because that is so... There's not even a word for it. It's just so special and awesome that we have that, and I'm getting that from all these stories. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. And even after saying that, like, oh, I wish someone would cut out that process. Like, I've realized that like that's what I do as well. Like, I was like,
yes,
like
you do.
Yeah. Like I'll go up to people and tell them like, hey, I don't think you should do this because you do so many of these other things well. And I was like, I guess that's like how Jesse's rubbed off on me.
It is,
like,
man. It is. I'm realizing that just now as you say it, and now that you're saying that, I've seen you do that so many times to people.
Yeah.
And so you taking that from Jesse, that thing that you appreciated so much that you're now passing on to other people. Yeah. You're doing that when you're
without even
realizing it. Like you can continue to do that, because some people you're going to be able to cut through that process, and cut through all these other things and help them on this next level, you know. And Jesse's been that for so many people, man.
And like that's like I always looked at before I even met Jesse, because I didn't meet him till I was a little over a year in, and I remember like people would just describe him in such this like magical way, and I'm like, yes, who is this guy? Oh yeah. And then I met him, and like I thought he was gonna be so much more negative than what I thought. Like just because people are like he commands respect and like and he's a pro and he's a pro's pro. Like you hear all these things and I'm like, oh my god, I'm like who am I meeting? And then you're like, I was surprised by like how welcoming he was to me, and like, hey, you're one of the boys now because you're friends with my friends. Like all of those like little things like and. It like, he's just, all those things are such an example. And like, that's what, like when I think of what a pro wrestler should be, like that's, to me, it's step one is just respect your peers, right? Like, and be a pro's pro. It's so sweet. I
love it.
I hate that I didn't realize these things, that they were so forefront in my face. Like it's nice.
Sometimes
like,
you don't realize these things until you speak them out loud. And I guess that's also part of the reason why I've enjoyed this process of talking to people, because as I'm speaking these things out loud, I'm realizing more and more the influence that Jesse's had on my life. And the influence it had on others' lives, and it's really neat to see that in real time, like you just did. I love that. I love that. So thanks for sharing that, man. It's pretty sweet.
So good.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Next, we're going to hear from Crazy Steve. Crazy Steve was an early guest on this podcast and is the only guest whose story is so epic I had to make it into a trilogy. Steve's episodes can be found in the archives in episodes 7, 8, and 9. Steve is a former TNA Wrestling Tag Team Champion and former TNA Wrestling Digital Media Champion. He's done a lot in the pro wrestling business, including being a wrestling trainer at Net Pro Studios. But it all began when he stepped into a wrestling ring for the very first time, thanks to Jesse Scott. Jesse booked Steve in his very first match for a Neo Spirit Pro Wrestling show, and they've been close friends ever since. So let's listen to some stories from our friend, Crazy Steve.
All right, Crazy Steven. Thank you for sitting down with me here. I'm asking guys to share maybe a Jesse story, and you just said to me as before I hit that red button, I have no idea what I can even say or talk about, and neither do I, because it's just this situation that I don't even know how to even deal with it, tackle it. But I do know I just felt led to like sit down with his brothers and just like say something with people that loved him and that he loved. So for whatever that's worth and what that means, I don't know. But if you have a story, a character trait of Jesse's that like stands out, something, I'm sure like anything, you start talking about somebody and about their life or about them, and then, man, there's a lot we could say, and there's a lot, but I don't know if you have. I'm just rambling now.
Yeah.
But as I ramble, maybe something came into your head, you know.
So like, let's again, yeah, like you said, I'm not really sure what to say, and there's been so much that's been said already.
Yeah.
So we'll start with Jesse was the first promoter to ever book me on a pro wrestling show.
Yes.
That's a good starting place.
That's a really good starting place.
And that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Showtime Eric Young. But yeah, he was the first promoter from Neo Spirit Pro to ever book me and have faith in me.
Yeah.
And then I would go on to live with him for a good year.
Yes.
Yeah, I lived with Jess and amongst 6 other professional wrestlers in this crazy wrestling house, all 7 of us.
I love it.
And so that's when I really got to know Jess.
Yeah.
One of the things that kind of sticks out to me, I don't know. So the story is like we were living in this house for a year before we got kicked out.
What a sweet like opening sentence to a chapter.
I shouldn't say we were getting kicked out. We kind of were, like the owners of the house wanted to put it on the market. So the guys who were renting the rooms had to find their own place. Yeah. Okay. And for me, I had moved out of my home in Canada when I was like 21.
Okay.
So now I'm living in this giant wrestler house.
Is this the first place that you lived
outside of my house?
Of like your like
outside my parents'
mom,
house.
dad, or whatever parent?
Correct.
Oh wow, jeez.
Yeah.
There it is.
Mom, dad,
to life.
I'm moving out. I'm gonna live with 6 other pro wrestlers. I should be okay.
Gosh.
I should be fine.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
All right.
So so everyone is kind of having to go their separate ways.
Yeah.
And for me, it was really shocking and very, very stressful because now I'm on my own now, and now I'm going to find my own place. I thought we did have a really good thing going.
Yes.
And it's come to its end.
Yeah.
So, and I remember we were sitting in the car. There's a few of us in there, and Jess was in the passenger seat, and I was explaining like, fuck, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm really stressed, this, that, and the other. And he said, see, this is how you know you're alive. This is how you know you're alive. Times like this are how you know you're alive. Yeah. It's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And it was. Yep. And everything was okay. Yeah. But that just always stuck with me for whatever reason.
Wow. What a good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had this ability to take something that seemed big or daunting or just maybe even too big to handle, and he could narrow it down to this poignant, almost poetic point that put it into this the exact perspective that you needed to hear at that moment. That was just one of many things that made Jesse really special. I'll share this with you because Stella actually shared this in a group the other day. His wife shared a wrestling story. Like, I was freaking out about the show and how we're gonna organize it. Like, I don't know how we're gonna do this. Like, there's tickets and da 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 da. And he goes, honey, people are going to buy tickets and show up and watch wrestling.
That's it. Yeah. Simple as that.
It.
Yeah.
Like, right? And it's like, oh, yeah, that's what it is.
That's what it is.
And that's what's happening. And that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's such an amazing way to just like, yep, okay, this is it. This is what it's about.
Yeah.
And oh man, we could probably talk for an hour about that line.
Yeah.
And this is how you know you're alive.
Yeah.
Like that means that's pretty deep.
Yeah, and it's always stuck with me. And like
Yeah.
I've moved several times, and I've been in far more stressful situations
Yes.
after since then, right? Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always stuck with me.
I love
and it was
that.
really interesting.
I love it.
Okay, I'll share one more thing too.
Okay.
This one. Okay, this one always makes me laugh, and it's just Jess's humor and how awesome his humor was.
Yeah.
So I'm driving with him. It was just me and Jess.
Okay.
And we were driving back to the worker house,
Yep.
and I had to let him know it was my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Oh, it's your birthday. Why didn't you say anything?" I was like, "Well, who cares? It's just my birthday." And so he's like, "Oh no, we got to do something. We got to do something." So we get into the worker house. He gathers around all the boys, and he's like, "Hey, guys, it's Steve's birthday today. We should take him go-karting. He's never been go-karting, and he's blind and he doesn't drive. It'll be great." And everyone's like, "Oh yeah, this is great." And we're all kind of like, "Yeah, okay." And it gets quiet, and then Jess goes, "Then after we're done that, let's all beat the shit out of him." Just to teach him things can go south at any time. And I died. I absolutely died. It was so, his timing and the cadence and all of it was so good. And then like every birthday after that, Jess, and well, you know this because you do this quite well as well. Every birthday, Jess would send me a message or a voice note or call me and just be like, Steve, I got to say I'm really proud of what I've seen from you as we've grown up throughout the years. I gave you your first match and you've been able to accomplish all these things on television and pay-per-view and pro wrestling in general. And I couldn't be more happy and more proud of you. And I just want to let you know, you're a real fucking piece of shit. And just turn it around. And at the end, it was the same lesson. Things can go south at any time, Steve.
Yeah.
And every year I would look forward to that specific message just because he just roped you in for so long and you knew it was coming.
Yeah.
You knew it was coming and you're just waiting on the edge of the seat and then it just nails you with it right at the end.
Oh, man.
And that's what friends are for.
That's what friends are for. I don't think there's another human being on this planet that I think could make piece of shit the most endearing term that you want to be called a piece of shit from
Yes.
Jesse Scott. That's how special he was, and I don't know if that's going to make any sense to anyone listening to this.
Yeah.
But you and I share that and know exactly what we mean by that.
Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
special that was, and how his humor was like no one else's, and how loving he was, and I love that. What a
amazing
dude! Thank you for sharing those.
Absolutely. My
Love you.
pleasure. Love you.
Our next guest is Jeremy Elliott. Jeremy Elliott is a martial arts champion who owns United Family Martial Arts in Niagara, an author of the book Life as an Art, Paint Your Picture with Your Passion, the head of the Embrace Our Journey campaign, bringing awareness to those living with FASD, and he's a pro wrestler who was trained by none other than Jesse Scott. So let's hear from martial artist and pro wrestler Jeremy Elliott.
All right, Jeremy Elliott.
Hey.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm good. So I'm gathering stories about Jesse, and I just I have like a list in my head of people that I want to talk to, and then we're here at Neo, and I'm kind of just like scanning the room.
Yeah.
And you weren't on my original list, and then I saw you. I'm like, oh my god. I got to talk to Jeremy Elliott because of a variety of reasons. Your connection to the school, to Jesse as a friend, to the wrestling company, to like sponsorship, doing business together with your stuff.
Absolutely.
Your Embrace Your Journey. Like everything that you're doing, there is like a tie to Jesse, his family. Like there's a lot.
100%.
There's like a lot of stuff. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so you're like... you're somebody that I need to be talking to right now. So
Yes,
I'm
sir,
so glad that we were able to do this.
I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you thinking of me and getting me on because, yeah, Jesse was my brother for sure. There's a lot. It's very deep. It's not just your normal, like, even, just like, he's my sensei. Like, that's, anytime I send him a text, he's sensei. And, like, but it became so much because, as we were both so young when, like, I sat at my first Neo show. You guys are all wrestling on it, November 2001.
Really? Okay.
And
so I'm going to learn some history here because there's some stuff I don't even know, right? It's funny when you're in the, you have these connections to these people, but you don't always even know the ties to those connections. So, like, I just learned that just now.
Yeah, like, I was actually looking at it today of, like, even who's on that show, right?
Okay.
And I went back to look, and I'm like the main event, Showtime. He's in that match. You're on the card. Primo's on the card. Actually, I think I saw one of Primo's first matches when he fought Los Jalapeno.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's Body Count versus Silver Rush.
Right.
And so, like, I'm in the crowd.
Cool, man.
I'm in the crowd for that. So, and it was that moment that I've always thought about doing wrestling.
Okay.
I've watched it, like some wild stories of, like, my mom. Her connection with wrestling is I have an 8x10 from Sweet Daddy Siki. Like, of all things, because he sung karaoke at the Klondike Hotel here in the Falls that my mother worked at.
So there's a cool Jesse connection there because Jesse was the master of karaoke. He could bring the house down in any karaoke scenario. So you say he's your sensei. So Jesse trained you? Like,
yes. So when I first, after that show, they were making the announcement. Anybody who wants to be a wrestler, contact the dojo. Okay. So I got there and I went, and it was Jesse and Big Jess that were there, and of course Danger Boy is the trainer at that point. Right. But I sit down and it's almost like they interviewed me. Like, why should you be here? Which is really neat because you never see that anymore. No. Right.
It's just like, just take this guy's money. and we're
it's $100 a month. Hey, pay me. Yeah. So it was kind of neat. So I basically tried to sell them that this is why I should do it. And I'm telling them about my martial arts. I almost used wrestling as a little bit of, I was going to go for the world title. So I went for my first world title in '99 and lost. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I need an edge.
And this is in what? Like, what discipline?
Open martial arts. Anybody comes down, right? Yeah. But for me specifically, my forte was the choreographed fight division. So basically, like a wrestling match, right? Like, me and opponent. There's a bad guy. There's a good guy.
Like a kata type.
Yeah. Okay. And we're fighting and beating the snot out of each other, and then the judges score who's got the best fight. Yeah. Right. So I figured, okay, like, not only do I love wrestling and would like to get into it, this is going to give me an advantage. I was going to Hollywood in December. Yeah. So this is like October, November-ish. Yeah. And so I went down, sold them on, hey, I'm a wrestler. I'm going to go for the world title. Yeah. Even almost saying, like, hey, if you put me on your, stuff, I'm going to be a world champion. I'm a business owner. I could help. Yeah. And I think they were still young in whoa, maybe we could get this guy in here too to help what we're doing. Yeah. And so, he basically almost took over the training, though. Danger Boy was listed as the trainer. Yeah. But I think it was at the time where he was kind of phasing. Yep. Sure. And so Jesse did most of the classes. Oh, cool. And so he was, like I said, I considered him right from then pretty much the main. Like, I took some advice and did some stuff with Danger Boy. Yeah. But your sensei was Jesse. And especially when Neil came back, because I left. We're all young, and same thing, adulting happens, wife, kids, everything, right? So at one point, I was like, okay, if I can't commit to this 100%, I don't actually want to do it. You shouldn't be giving me any spots if I can't do this. Full go. I got a business. I got to run this business. I got to commit to this. When things are done, let's readdress. And so it's funny how everything came back around, because I won multiple world championships, and of all people ran into I was doing an autograph session with Kurt Angle in Pittsburgh, and that's when he was, hey, you should wrestle, go do stuff again, and so it started to flow again. And then sooner or later, I started to get back on smaller independents. I did a lot in the States, and then I don't know if it would be around 2010 when that would have been when D'Amore did the Max Pro. Okay. And so we ran Niagara Falls. Yeah. And Jesse called me and he's like, hey, you want to wrestle on this? I'm like, absolutely. And that's where the connection came again. And then, sooner or later, Neo Point 2 was open again. And the school was open, and I was going all the time to help Jess.
So I'm just fixated on this idea of him being your sensei. So here's the main question and that I want to ask and see if we can get to here is anybody that has a sensei. I mean, that's your teacher, that's your mentor, that's your person, right? That's like pouring into you, giving you advice. Is there like one or two key lessons about life or wrestling or both, because we know they're the same thing, which is why the show is called Wrestling is Life is Wrestling, because they're the same. Is there a lesson or two that really epitomizes something that you've taken from Jesse that you still hold on to, you're still using?
I think the best thing that Jess gave all of us was just he was open to everything. He was never like, some people just shut things out.
Yes, they do.
And Jess was never that. And like Jess, like they said it on the funeral the other day, he could get along with every group. If it was a skinhead group or a rocker group or a skater group or the hip hop group, Jess was in and he could get along with everybody.
He could. And
I've tried to constantly use that because that's the way I feel. Like I think I connected really well with Jesse in that way. And so how that relates to wrestling, you know, everybody goes through a little bit of a bitter phase and wrestling's
Yeah.
But Jesse always was that, well, you know what? Hey, we'll watch some 3-disc DVDs of WCW Nitro because that's fun and we're going to laugh. Yeah. Or, and I always would laugh. So, like, if I would watch, like, $5 wrestling, and I'm thinking of Jess because I'm just like, he would love to watch anything that's just dumb or good.
Like wrestling's already awesome, but if you watched wrestling with Jesse Scott, it became exponentially more awesome.
And that's something I remember, too, like the road trips. We had a little DVD player that we would bring in the van. So if we went in, we would bring whatever disc we could find, and we're watching, and you listen to his commentary as we're going was that's just priceless. Special, so like that's something that I really got from him, and like the sensei part where I really feel is the most important, and this is even just these last few weeks has been the hardest for me, is if I have a big match, I've always texted him. Like, and I, hey, sensei. Like, that's how I do my text. Yeah. I would always say, hey, sensei. And I would tell him, like, you know, I can think back to just, like I said, and then him being able to watch, like, the Resolution. I found Minoru Suzuki. Yeah. Like, that was something, and I had been away for 4.5 years because my boy was playing football. Yeah. And, like, but then, like, once he got into wrestling, again, the first person I'm texting is Jesse.
Of course.
Guess what? This is what my boy's doing. I've sent him videos of my boy training. Yeah. And, of course, him becoming a family man, he loved that. And he would send me texts about his love for what I was doing with William. Yep. And like I said, and it never stopped. Match, hey, sends, and I would text him. And, like, I know for me personally, that's been one of the hardest things is there's been a few matches and I'm not texting him. Yeah. You know, even there was one that I had I texted him, but it was pretty much the day he's going into hospice. Yes. And I know, and I'm like, I don't know if he's going to read this. I don't know if he's going to see this, but man, I am sending it because I don't care. Good like even you. Like we did the one show with Showtime, and I took a picture with Showtime, and I just sent it to Jess. Hey, since Polish Hall 01.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate that story. I love that you got to have Jesse as your sensei, and I'm sure there'll be more and more times, you know, in your life that something will come up, and even though you can't text your sensei, there'll be something that he instilled in you in your training or in an important life lesson or some silly thing he said in passing during watching a 3-disc WCW thing that all of a sudden click. I know this happens to me. It'll click, and it's like, oh, that's something that I have within me that I got from Jesse, and that's a gift that will continue to be giving to all of us that were his brothers. So as a fellow brother of Jesse, thank you for sharing that.
No worries.
And man, it's so awesome that you got to have him as your sensei, man.
I'll give you one more because speaking of being a sensei, so obviously I love teaching, and it's something that I've been doing. Like my business is 25 years old now. Yeah. Yesterday, after having this funeral and all of this and tough times, I got to go teach 2 hours of pro wrestling. Yeah. So I was in that ring, and I woke up and still, like all of us, probably heavy. But I got into that ring, and I laced up that boots, and I'm knowing that this class is going to be for Jesse, and talking about, like, somebody said to me, his legacy is always going to live on.
That's right.
And I'm like, so, hey, this is it. I'm just a part of that now.
Yes.
And so if I can instill, and we had an amazing 2 hours, and it felt so good just to be able to do that, and and we're thinking of him.
That's right, man.
Yeah. But thanks for having me.
Hey,
I appreciate
man, thank you
guys.
for having that, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next up is Primo Scordino. Primo is one half of the Ontario indie wrestling tag team, the Italianos. Primo's entire wrestling journey has occurred alongside Jesse. Primo was there the first day Jesse stepped foot into a ring and took his first bump at wrestling school. He wrestled Jesse in Jesse's very first professional wrestling match. And 25 years later, he was in the ring when Jesse entered it for the very last time to say goodbye to his fans. Let's hear from Primo Scordino. Yeah, so I'm just getting stories and I'm asking. I got a good mix of people. I got a good mix of friends. I got a good mix of people that have worked with them. And I want to make sure that I talk to you for a lot of reasons. One, I mean, you work so closely with him, with Neo, specifically this last reincarnation of it. But like you were with Jesse from the beginning. I remember hearing stories of him power bombing the hell out of you in like some of your very first like early matches. Yeah. So it's like it's nice to get to just talk to somebody about, or talk to somebody who was there from the beginning of Jesse's wrestling journey. And then just, I don't know if there's any stories that you want to tell or things that you want to say about Jesse. I'm not even, it's totally kind of up to you. I'm getting some funny stories like getting power bombed. I'm getting some things people just want to say about him. Like, I don't know, like the floor is yours and we'll just kind of chat about really kind of whatever you might want to say.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but like the sad part for me is I was so young when me and Jess started. I was only 16. And
right. I forgot that. Yes.
And I mean, it's well documented, the start that me and him had under certain people. I don't want to say an excuse, but I did get hit in the head a lot back then. Right. So, and not being fully developed, going through puberty, like there's a lot of stuff I forget. And one of the biggest things I'm going to miss about Jess is literally every time we'd go on a road trip or every time we get together or whatever, he was always like, remember this? And I'd be like, no. And then he would tell the story and then I'd be like, oh my God, now I do.
Yeah.
Right. And then it was even right down to remember when this person came to the school and I'd be like, no. He's like, you don't remember that person? And I'd be like, oh crap. Yeah, I do now. Mm-hmm. Right. So like there's so many stories, especially at that beginning part, because like I was so young and like I was, living recklessly back then. Like there's a lot of things that like I forget and then he would say and I would be like, oh my God, now I remember it. And that's actually going to be one of the biggest things I miss about him. And just the way he was able to tell the stories too. And like I would just end up on the floor laughing. But like, yeah, I mean, we definitely started together. I mean, it was different back then, obviously. Like, so I had my first match. What's that?
I was gonna say, did you meet him like through wrestling because you both met at the wrestling school? Okay. So I wasn't sure if you guys had met earlier than that or all right.
No, so essentially what ended up happening, the way it happened is I joined a wrestling school when I was 16, under this unanimous person.
Yeah. I've also told the story about him getting screwed over and I refuse to even say the guy's name.
Yeah, right? I don't want to give him any mention whatsoever.
Exactly, because he's a complete dirtbag asshole that shouldn't even be mentioned. But yes,
100%. So essentially, what ended up happening is I joined this wrestling school, got beat up for a few months, and then he decided to run the show in Niagara Falls, and that was the very first show at the Polish Hall. So I had my first match on this show being only 16 years old, and I pretty much drew the entire crowd. And I'm not saying that in a egotistical way, but like I was in high school. So my entire grade 11 class and my entire family came to this show. And other than that, like there was like some wrestling fans in the show and Jess was in the front row of that show.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Right. So was Laz. Yeah, so was Laugh.
Oh man, I didn't know that. Okay, this is cool. Yeah.
So I had this god awful first match. You know, I'm not trained. I'm working some guy from Montreal that I've never met before, and he pretty much for 7 minutes he beat me up, and then I hit my finishing move out of nowhere on him 1, 2, 3, and then that was the end of the match. Right. So I believe it was the week after that show that Jess came to the school, and he came with the Mook, and I believe Ruben, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And
I talked to Ruben, and Ruben Jackson Jarvis is what I called him on the show. But yes, that wrestling fans remember him as Jackson Jarvis. Yeah, he mentioned a little bit of this introduction into wrestling through this same dirtbag. Yeah, so he would have been there too. Yeah,
that was my first introduction to jazz.
Okay.
So it all kind of stemmed from me meeting him, stemmed from me having that first match. And then, of course, Jess joined the school, and then all the shenanigans after that happened. And so like he kind of knew how to bump because he was like, Jess was always like twiddling around in the old RWA days. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but that's when he really came to the school, and then that's what was my first introduction to him. And then he joined the school, and then all the madness afterwards happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, but so then it was about another 4 months after that, 4 or 5 months, that this other person ran another show up in Gananoque, and that was Jess's first match, and I was his first match, and of course I'm led to lead the match because I'm the only one who's ever had a match. Right. It was madness. Madness ensued.
Oh man. So you were Jesse's very first match. Okay. Yeah. This is sweet. Was Jesse always as, I don't know, flamboyant, positive energy, that just the way he always came across to me? Was he like that from the very beginning? Like of you meeting him?
Yeah. Yeah. He was over the top. He was, as you say, charismatic, flamboyant.
Oh yeah.
Like, man. I remember him taking his first bump, and like, obviously it hurt, but like he popped up, like that super big look on his face, and like it just over, like I thought he was going to throw himself over the top rope after he took his first bump, because he was just so excited. Right. Like,
oh man, I love it.
Yeah. That was always him.
Always him. Do you have any like memories of either your first, like something that might have happened in that first match, or some of your early matches? Because I remember him always talking about matches that he had with you, whether when you were starting to travel to New York, or just these like kind of rinky-dink middle of nowhere shows.
Oh yeah.
Because indie wrestling was like this mystery to me when I started, right? Like I didn't know. I was just like a WWE kid. So then when I started to learn that there was indie wrestling in these like little remote nothing places, and he'd tell me these stories, it would just like blow my mind. And a lot of his stories involved wrestling you. So
it was the same for me. Like I really didn't know like indie wrestling existed. I would say I only grew up on WWF, WWE, especially being up here in Ontario. We didn't get anything else.
No, exactly.
Right. Yeah. And like I didn't know about Maple Leaf Wrestling. I was too young. I didn't know about any of that stuff. I only grew up watching Hulk Hogan, WWF, WWE, and that was pretty much it.
Yep.
I had no idea about indie wrestling. In grade 8, I guess I went to my first indie wrestling show. It was at the Niagara Falls Memorial Arena, and it was ran by a guy that I actually ended up working out at the gym with later years. And that was kind of like my first introduction to indie wrestling, but I didn't know it was indie wrestling. Like there was like Marty Jannetty on the show, and I think Earthquake and Typhoon were on the show. And I just remember being front row and being like, how come these guys aren't in WWF anymore? Like, I didn't know it was an indie wrestling show. I just knew wrestling was coming, and I wanted to go watch it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my first match was really my first introduction to indie wrestling.
Oh, that's crazy.
Right. So, and who also was actually on that first show when I was 16 was Tornado.
Oh, sweet. Of course he was.
Of course he was, right?
He was on everything.
And that's why I love Tornado to this day, because he remembered me from that very show. And like when years later, like, because for me, I was only 16, and back then the Wrestling Commission was around.
Yes.
So you had to be 18 to wrestle. And I didn't know any of this because the person that trained me didn't tell me any of this. And I didn't know I couldn't be on these shows. So I went through that period of time where like I got like pretty down and I couldn't wrestle and I had to take time off. And when I did finally kick my ass into gear and come back into wrestling when I was like 19, Tornado like remembered me and like he would like pull me in the ring and show me stuff all from that match then when I was 16. So I always remembered that about him, right? So I always loved that about Mark. That's off topic anyways, but
no, that's cool. Because I talked to Tornado and he loved Jess, and so and going back to that memory thing, like Tornado has amazing recall and memory. It's way crazy. More like you, man. And I can relate to what you said about Jesse, like because I'm asking people questions a lot about. Tell me a story, and some guys can like recall it quick, and like if someone was asking me, do I have like one story about Jess? It's like I kind of have a few, but then people were telling me stories that I was involved in or I was there for, and I completely forgot until they told me. I'm like, oh, it was so cool to hear it because I'm more like you. I don't have a good memory. Mark does. Jesse did.
Jesse's memory was at like so sharp.
Oh yes.
That was, and even like going into his last days, seeing how sharp his memory and his brain still was one of the hardest things to see from the outside, right? Because like I couldn't fathom what his brain and what he was thinking was going through, right? It's not like and I hate to compare it to something like Alzheimer's or dementia because I've seen a few people go through that, and seeing people go through that's absolutely horrifying. Not remembering their life, not remembering who their loved ones are, and all that. But on the flip side, to see how sharp Jess still was at the end, I think that was almost more torturous for him. You know, to
an interesting point.
Try to comprehend everything.
Yeah, that's true because it's not like he has. Oh man, I've never even thought about it that way. But yeah, because he had all these crisp memories, and his brain was super sharp. Like
super sharp.
He was just to the very, very end.
Very end, you know. And
his body just failed, right? But his mind was there.
100%. And when we had that big get together at his house, like he was, you know, till 1 a.m. You know, he's up and he's energetic and he's telling stories. And even that night, he was telling stories of stuff that I forgot. Where I was like, I was on the floor laughing.
Yeah,
right. So
I was just talking to Stella about this the other day, and for our listeners, Stella's Jesse's wife, but she was like, I wish I would have recorded that day because then we'd have all these stories recorded. And I said, I know what you mean. That's an interesting thought and it's a valid thought. However, I told her, just like any Jesse Scott story, one, it's going to stay in my mind forever. It's that day is like seared in my mind. The fact that I'll let the listeners know this. When all wrestlers got together, Jesse wanted to have a big get together, one last powwow with all of his friends and loved ones. But he kind of warned us and said, I get really tired very quick because he was in the middle of his illness and his treatments. He's like, I'll maybe last a few hours if I'm lucky, and then you guys will have to leave. 10 hours later, he's still giving her, telling stories, laughing, getting up, doing impressions, telling all of his classic stories. It was the most unbelievable day. It was a gift from God. It was just amazing.
100%.
But it's seared in my mind. And also, and I told this to Stella, like any Jesse Scott story, it's only going to like grow over the years and get more ridiculous and bigger in my mind, right?
Yeah,
like, you know, with a few years of Jesse will have costumes on in every story that he was telling, and any number that he mentioned is multiplied by 7, like any good wrestler story. But yeah, man, like to the very end of his life, his mind was sharp and he was there. Yeah,
and that from like as far back as I can remember, that's how he always was.
Yeah.
You know, back to, I mean, and we're going back like literally 25 years, right? That's how he always was. So, I mean, it's mind boggling to me to sit back and say 25 years ago, right?
Yeah. I say all the time. It's weird. A quarter of a century ago.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was Jess's first match. And then, I mean, that match, we thought it was the greatest thing in the world. It was god awful, you know, like,
of course.
We wanted to like send it in because we were both huge ECW marks. You know, we loved ECW. We wanted to send that match into ECW.
Oh, yeah.
Super power bombs off the rope, top rope, and like everything. We just did anything and everything you could think of.
Yeah.
And the promoter too, like, had separate heel and face locker rooms for that show. And I'm the face, and Jess is the heel, so we can't like talk about the match or anything, right?
Oh wow, yeah.
So it was the one and only time that I've ever had that, and like so. Jess tells the story about the guy breaking his leg right before, and they're wheeling him into the locker room right before he goes out. I have no idea this is going on whatsoever because I'm in a completely different locker room. So Jess makes his way out to the ring. They call me out to the ring, and I can just see this look in his eye, like he's like, like all over the place. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a thing. This is gonna be a thing.
Okay. So I remember the story now because Jesse would tell it, and I'm cautious to even. I'm not even going to try to tell it in any way, shape, or form as good as Jesse did.
Because you can't.
Because you can't. But just so our listeners know what you mean and why his eyes were so big is right before he goes out to the ring with his buddy Primo for his first match. The match before, a guy broke his leg. And the promoter was like, oh, come on, it can't be that bad. And they had him on the stretcher. It's like, oh, it's bad. And Brown's like, nah, it can't be. Let's see it. And then he looks, and his bone of his leg is coming out through his leg. There's blood everywhere. And the promoter's like, oh, my God. Don't show me that. Like, starts gagging. Oh, my God, I got to get sick. And then like, slaps Jesse on the back and says, go get him, kid. Have a good match. And so Jesse comes out for his very first match. After seeing that, I can only imagine the look in his eyes.
Oh, and then I go out there and I'm just like, what is going on? I don't know anything. I'm none of this. I have no knowledge of this whatsoever because I'm in a completely different locker room.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so that was his foray into his first match. And then, we had a few other matches because now, again, by this point, like, I can wrestle in Ontario, right? And, of course, after we left that person and we started learning all the rules and actually properly being trained, like, I can wrestle in Ontario, right? So we had another match in Buffalo, New York. I believe that was his second match. Might have been his third by that point. But yeah, that was the first time he ever knocked me out in a match.
How did he do that?
German suplex.
There it is.
There.
You got to get signed by EC Dub, man. You got to
do Germans. Right. And there was about 8 people in the audience.
Of course.
And there was like the ring had like screws coming up out of the canvas and all this stuff. And he wants to hit me with this German suplex. So again, his arms are just too high. And I do one of those like where you go all the way over and your feet end up over top of your head.
Oh, yeah, I've had a couple of those.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I was completely knocked out. Right. I'm supposed to kick out and Crazy Joe, Chase Fury, he was the ref for the match.
Right.
And there's video of it. And he goes 1, 2. I don't kick out. He looks around. Oh shit. 3. And I'm completely out of it. Like I'm just completely out of it.
Oh my God.
So that was how that match ended. Like that was just why like.
So crazy, man.
Why are we doing a German suplex in your second or third match, like in front of 8 people?
Yeah. Oh, because that shows you. I mean, a lot of us did that when we were young, but it also shows you like Jesse was like one thing that's come up with various topics. A character trait of Jesse was like, no, he was all in on anything that he did.
Oh,
like,
100%.
Right? Like his passion was there. So like the 8 people or 800 or no one person shows up, the match is going to be the same because his passion was cranked to 10 no matter what.
Yeah.
So him doing a German, and obviously it's a little bit like you're a greenhorn, so you just want to do all the stuff, but there's a huge element of that is also just his passion of just wanting to go all out, balls to the wall. Because when he loved something, like he loved wrestling, it was everything.
Yeah,
that showed. Yeah, and that showed in everything that he did.
Another funny story was this was one of his earlier matches, but by this point we had started to be like properly trained, right? And we did a tag match in Buffalo. I think it was me and Jess versus I want to say Original Hacker and I think Danger Boy.
Okay,
and we did a tag in Buffalo, and we broke the ring in the tag.
Oh, I don't think I've heard this one.
Yeah.
Wow. So broken legs, screws coming through rings, broken rings, knockouts.
Like brother. Literally, like the side of the ring collapsed. Like I think we hit. I don't remember what the finish was, but it was like a double move. 1, 2, 3, and we stand up, and the whole side of the ring collapsed.
Oh man,
it was a disaster. Like we were just like, what is going on here? Like every match at the beginning there was something, right?
Yeah. Oh man, I love it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, welcome to the wrestling business. Be ready for anything.
Anything. So, but so like I was around, like you said. So even though I had to take a few years where I couldn't wrestle because of the commission and everything, like I was still always coming to the school, like, because we trained together, right? I was always still coming to school. I was always still around helping out at the shows. I was always at the shows, tearing down the ring, setting up the ring, tearing down, helping with whatever, right? So I was always around, and I was always around in the back to like kind of help Jess run everything. Like even when I was younger, I don't want to say I was running it earlier on, but like that first run, I was always still like doing all the setup, teardown, helping run, like do things for the show, whatever. So I was always there from the beginning and saw all the madness that ensued. And then it was really the second run when we were doing stuff out of the Fight Club where I really started more helping with the booking, helping book the talent and all that kind of stuff. And Jess used to say I always had to bring him down because his booking ideas were always so crazy, right? He had such a crazy wrestling mind, which I'm sure, Big Jess talked about in the past.
Yep.
And Jess would go off on these ideas, and I'd be like, Jess, that's great. If we had TV.
Yeah.
How are we supposed to parlay this onto an indie show, right? So there was always like his brain, like he was just all over the place. He had such a wrestling mind that he was just so creative, and it was his outlet that he just, like you said, he poured everything into it.
Yep.
Right. And when he would get on an idea and he would go, like it would just go. Like it's almost a shame that he was never a TV writer, honestly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, and bless you for being able to reel him in, because I've sat down with Jesse Scott, and he's pitched something to me, this idea, and he was so passionate and so infectious with any of his ideas that by the end of it, you're like, yeah. Like if he's like, you're gonna spear him through a brick wall, and then all these things are gonna come in out of the rubble, you're gonna get up, and then the dust is gonna settle, and then the wall's gonna be broken, and then like this wall's gonna fall down. And like you could say something as crazy as that, and by the end, you're like, yeah, we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
And like, so like he was so good at just getting you hyped and like believing in yourself that sometimes he needed that person to be like, hey man, like,
and you said
that's an amazing idea, but like it's not actually even possible.
It's literally the words that you just said about like hyping yourself up, but believing in yourself. And that's a lot of like my memories of Jess too, like a lot of, because he wasn't like that just in wrestling, right? And when you spent a lot of time with Jess, he was like that with everything we did, and one of the biggest things is I will always be thankful for. Like I always said, he always pushed me to be a better person outside of the ring as well, right? So like when I decided to go back to school, like, you know what I mean? I remember being at the Fight Club at the wrestling gym, telling him I was going back to school. And that same passion that he put into wrestling, he was like, hyping me up, like, you're going to do great. Good for you. This is what you should be doing. Blah, 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 blah. When I bought my first house, like he wanted to be the first person to come and see it. Like, you know what I mean? Because that's just who he was.
Yes.
Right. It was, even when I was bodybuilding, like he would come to my shows. You know, he would ask me about my training. He was like, he would pump me up. You're going to do great. You know, you look fantastic. Keep going. Like that passion that he had for wrestling, he had for everything in life. And when you really knew Jesse, the person, like it all translated into everything else in life. And man, that's some of the stuff I'm going to miss.
Absolutely,
right?
man. He was such a good friend.
Yeah.
So many, like you said, it's kind of fitting. One of the things that I've learned through talking to people is like, man, like Jesse kind of epitomizes the title of my podcast, which is Wrestling is Life is Wrestling, because wrestling is life and life is wrestling. And there's so many life lessons that you can learn from wrestling that you can apply to do well in life. And that's even why I started the show. But like Jesse's always had that mindset. Like
always,
people that talk about being trained by him were always saying like they weren't learning wrestling lessons from him and they were learning life lessons. And like you said, the same passion and enthusiasm and fire that he brought to his wrestling, he brought that to his friends in life and their passions and the things that they were into. Like he brought that into it poured it this cup of wrestling wasn't enough to hold the passions of Jesse Scott. Like it ran over into and poured and seeped into all aspects of his life. And we were just lucky enough to be there to like get that runoff into our lives, which sounds like that's what you got with your bodybuilding and your home. I love that.
Everything. You know,
nothing you just said surprises me in the slightest.
I said, like, you know, he was the epitome of everything that was good about wrestling. And that is exactly like you said, that's everything that translates out of wrestling into real life. Right. And that's honestly what I'm going to remember about him the most. You know, as all the stories, as funny as they are, and all the madness we went through and all the road stories, the training, the matches, you know, it was all the other stuff, the running the shows together, the booking meetings and running the wrestling school and all this craziness. It was everything that translated from that into real life that I will always remember him for. Right.
Yes. Me too.
So,
me too. 100%, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing those stories and sharing those sentiments, because I wholeheartedly agree. And we were just very blessed and very lucky to have Jesse as our friend. And I love that you were able to share some early stories of his first match. And I think I'm making it a point to continue to share the Jesse stories in my life with others and encouraging others to do the same. Because I really believe that his legacy is going to live on forever, both, you know, in the wrestling business through Neo, all through the stories that we share about him, and absolutely through his family, through his 3 beautiful kids, and through his wife. Like his legacy is going to live forever, man. And we'll just keep sharing stories.
It deserves to be, right?
Absolutely, it deserves to be.
I mean, he did so much good for so many people. He really, like, I know it's cliche to say, but he really was one of the good ones, you know, in industry filled with scumbags. He was like, you know, he was a shining star. And I don't even really like to use that phrase in industry filled, because there's so many good people in wrestling.
Sure.
For every bad person there is in wrestling, there's a good one. But Jesse was on another level.
He was 100%, man. He was on another level.
You know, he was a brother, you know.
Yes, he was.
He was
a brother to all of us, man.
All of us, you know, and we're all brothers. We all started together. We're all brothers, but Jesse was the glue that really brought us all together in many different ways. And like I said, he was a level above. So,
man, well said. Thank you, man. I appreciate you sharing your stories, brother, so much.
Anytime.
Yeah, love you,
anytime. Man. Love you too, brother.
Our final guest is Jesse Frisky. Ontario indie wrestling fans might remember him as one half of the most feared tag teams in the province, Body Count. Jesse will give us some unique insight into the man Jesse Scott, because Jesse Scott's beginnings as a wrestling promoter, creative writer, business owner, and wrestling trainer were all done alongside Jesse Frisky. Fighting Spirit Pro Wrestling was started by the two Jessies. Neo Spirit Pro Wrestling was formed out of Fighting Spirit by the two Jessies. The legacy that Jesse Scott has left behind are things that happen behind the scenes that wrestling fans have never seen or heard about. And those things were done hand in hand with Jesse Frisky. Jesse is also a dear friend of the Scott family and was with Jesse during the final days of his life, which we'll hear about now. So let's hear from Jesse's longtime business partner and friend, Jesse Frisky.
I am here with a very special person, Big Jess, who has played a very important part in my journey and my story of becoming a professional wrestler. We're here at a Neo Wrestling event, so that crazy madness and yelling and screaming and chanting you might hear in the background is the Neo Pro Wrestling event, which is very fitting that we're here today. I asked you, Jesse, to specifically maybe tell a story, and then you told me that you actually have a story that's not particularly yours, but you've been given permission to share it from Jesse's wife, Stella, which makes me very excited to hear what this is going to be.
All right. So, I mean, there are millions of Jess stories that, you know, when I think of my favorite Jess moments, it was usually when him and I were writing ideas, and most of those ended up in him hitting me or biting me or with those big eyes and that goofy smile that he would do, and he'd be like, "Oh, I hate you so much." But this one hit me particularly hard and awesome because right up till the very end, Jess was Jess.
Yes, he was.
He never changed. And
no matter what he looked like on the outside, he was still always there.
So this was the Sunday before we moved him into hospice. So the idea was on Monday, a few of us were going to go down. He was still conscious enough, able, strong enough to move on his own. We were just going to support him, help him get his stuff in.
Okay.
The Sunday morning, they're packing stuff, and so he's packing up his stuff, and he says, Stella, and he goes, make sure you grab the good toilet paper. And Stella looks at him, she goes, honey, it's a hospice, they're gonna have toilet paper. And he says, no, you gotta get the 3-ply. You gotta respect the butthole. Can I say asshole?
You say asshole.
Okay, so is that what he said? He said he looks at Stella, and he says, Stella, he looks at Stella and he says, you gotta respect the asshole. We need the 3-ply. Get the 3-ply toilet paper. Bring it. So I guess they do that, and they keep packing, and then Stella's doing some other stuff. And Stella! I don't do a very good Jess impersonation.
You were doing actually a very good job, my friend.
Stella, where am I slack? And Stella's like, what? Jess, like, I don't, a slack? What's a slack? Pants woman! Where are my pants? Get me my pants! And this is literally less than 24 hours before we moved him into the hospice.
Oh my gosh.
And it killed me because we got there the Monday morning, and he had obviously taken a turn that night before going to the hospice. And, you know, he was basically vegetative at that point from medication, and then we got him into the hospice, and I guess I had one more visit. I was scheduled to stop by, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Another wrestler was in there during the day and said he was asleep and couldn't really function, so I got in there and I saw the lights off, so I was just gonna leave, right? And Stella said, no, come in, he's awake, he's conscious, he's laughing. So went in, I said my piece to him. I told him he was my hero, even though I'm 9 years older than him. I said, you know what, man, you're my hero. And you know, I said, there's something different about you, you know. I said, it hit me today. I'm like, you're friggin' Optimus Prime. I was like, you got the Matrix, man, you got the touch. And then the two of us broke into You Got the Touch from the Transformers movie in the bed of the hospice. And then he looked at me and he looked at me and he goes, I got a serious question. And I go, what's up? And he goes, do I look Dutch? And I was like, what? And he goes, no, seriously. He's like, do I look Dutch? And I said, no, man, you barely look black. And we started crying about that and laughing. And then I made a Predator joke. And then we did the Dylan handshake.
I saw a picture of that.
We did the Dylan handshake. And we sang a little bit more. And, I prayed with him. And he put his hand on my head. And that was the last I saw him.
That's so amazing.
But I mean, just that visit was so against what everybody said I was going to get, you know, and his smile was there. Yeah. And, the singing, the transfer, and the Dutch thing. Like, we're talking less than 4 days before the end. Yeah. Was that. I mean, I'm sure you could have any number of guys up here and you could fill hours and hours of Jess stories. And,
I haven't had any stories from the end like that. And so I'm really glad that you shared that, man. Yeah. And it's very special.
I wanted Stella to say it at the funeral, but I don't think she felt right about bringing up, pants.
I'm just so glad that she gave you the blessing to share that. Yeah. Because it says about his character in that, as this was Jess to a T, whatever he could do to make someone laugh.
Absolutely.
And the fact that this man is literally on his deathbed doing what he can to put a smile on your face and make that moment epitomizes who Jess was as a man.
Yes.
But it also, what it speaks to me about it is what a gift from God that was for him and for you.
100%.
And you know what I'm talking about because we got that day with him where we all hung out for 10 hours and got to listen to Jesse's stories. He got to come and get into the ring one last time to be in front of his fans and all of a sudden become Tiberious King, become JT Playa, where we literally thought we were going to lose him 24 hours before.
Anybody that saw him arrive to that arena would have been shocked if they saw, because I didn't think it was going to happen. When we pulled him out of the wheelchair, I was shocked.
We were there together side by side, and I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen right now. Right.
And then his music hit, and Carm went to open the curtain. Do you remember that? Carm went to open the curtain, and he's like, "Fuck, Carm, you stole my spot."
Yeah, like, and it popped me so hard. Yeah, and like again, that was all I could think of was like, to thank God for that and go, this is just God going, here you go. Yeah, I know you need this.
Bit more.
Here's a little bit more for you. And like he kept doing that for Jesse and for his friends and the people. Like right at the end, it was such a powerful testimony to both what God is willing to do for us, but a testimony to Jesse's character and who he was to the end. He was always authentically himself from day one.
Unapologetically so, right?
Yes.
He didn't know anybody a thing. He was just going to say what he said.
No.
And it's funny because, Stella is equally, like, she's like, all the best parts of Jess and his sense of humor live on through her.
I know.
Like she is like,
she's hilarious.
I don't know how many people from your podcast have like, we had this group going from the people.
I know, and I haven't had anybody that is in that. Really.
And it's funny because at one point she went on there and she said, if anybody wants to leave the group now that he's passed, I'm okay with that.
And this is a text group we're talking about. So now, like we're in this text group of a bunch of different people from all walks of Jesse's life who loved him and were important, and I'm honored to be in it, and you as well. So she's saying if anybody wants to leave, it makes sense.
And then with perfect, I don't know what else to call it. We'll just say Jesse's got timing, because I could almost hear his voice saying it. She said, "You'll only be about 20% asshole in my books if you do." And you're like, oh my gosh, and I do find that he continues to rib people in certain ways, and I've heard that stupid Kanye West song more in the last month than ever. Yeah. But like I said, you know, I went to help them move, and I walked downstairs, and I'm habitually early. I like to be early ever, so I'm like 15 minutes before everybody else. Yep. So I get in there and I started looking around. I said, well, I'm just going to clear everything from back rooms, pull them into the front, and so I grab a bag to move it out, just a bunch of gym bags, and sure enough, right, first thing to fall out, a pair of his black boots and his old JT Playa tights.
Amazing.
Fall out, and I just had this minute in his basement, just me and his tights, and I'm like, you're a jerk. Like, of all the bags that you leave, you couldn't zip it closed. Right. Right? I love it. But he was special, you know. So many people, you know, they think they know him. But I'll tell you, the guys that came up, you, Jer, Crazy Steve, like that original Neo group, the 40 or 50 of us, the 40 years we got with him, or the 25 years we got with him, what a gift. And people say, you know, it was such a big loss, but, you know, it was. But I'll say, I think everybody that's ever been involved with any of the Neo stuff, including myself, it's really put into perspective how important all of you guys are to the rest of us. You know, we've all disappeared. The ones of us that don't wrestle anymore until the Memorial Show in September. You know, it's made you analyze, like, when I was, you know, a single dad at, you know, 25 years old, no family, nothing, you know, you guys became my family. Jess became my brother. And we've all had those times throughout where it's been that group that has picked you up. And I think with Jess passing, it's made everybody realize, I think, just how important life is. Yes. And, you know, like, I hug my kids a little harder. I mean, 43 years old, that breaks my heart. You know? But he was a jerk right till the end. I know. A loving, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, man.
You know?
Well, and I want to take this opportunity because you're speaking to something I wanted to say already, and it fits perfectly in that, like, it's really hit me a lot over the last couple of weeks, like, how important he was in my journey. Like, if it wasn't for him getting screwed over from Gator and him deciding to take his fate and destiny into his own hands and make this wrestling thing work, and then for you to come alongside, and then for you being one of the people, along with Jesse, to accept me into that family right away, even though I'm a 130-pound soaking wet look like a heroin addict skinny kid, and go, nope, you get to come into this crazy misfit family too, and immediately get welcomed.
But we punished you.
We
stuck you with American Josh.
But I just want to, I want to publicly, I get to say this publicly, thank you for accepting me. Publicly thank Jess. You guys, you know, you're my brothers, and I love you. And you're right. It's made me appreciate those things exponentially more, and this journey that we've all been on. And also how special it is that we're all still together is very rare in this business.
I agree.
That we all get to still be together to show our appreciation to each other. And I think the glue that has held everything together has been Jesse Scott.
I agree.
And
I agree.
I think that's an amazing thing.
And I think when this documentary team that they're filming this thing, when he finally sits down with me in a week or so, because he's trying to get obviously all the out of town guys. When people finally hear how Neo and Fighting Spirit started, there was no reason for me and Jess to find each other in that room, because it was just literally they were closing the gym one day. I happened to walk in to the guy's office and say, we want you to kick out Gator and we want the keys. And he's like, well, who's we? And I said, well, me. And he goes, well, there's got to be more than one. He goes, I'm not working with just one guy. I did that with Gator, and he owes me 8 months rent. And like the school was about to be closed this Saturday that we were talking about. And literally walked in, and he's like, who? And I said, oh, that Jess kid. I said, me and him. And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, why him? And I said, oh, there's something there. We work well together. And little did we know that we would start sitting down and writing. And it was awesome because Jess had this great knowledge of Japanese wrestling.
Yes, he did.
And it was like a walking bookmark, you know, like just encyclopedia. Of it.
I know.
Me, on the other hand, I just watched wrestling, but I was. Most people will laugh because I don't look like an avid reader, but I'm a bookworm. I love to read. I love fiction. I love storytelling.
Okay.
So when we would come up with an idea, we would often be at polar ends of the spectrum of where we wanted to go. But then we would, you know, work it back and forth, and forth. And then I'd say something and he'd bite me in the arm because he liked it so much, or he'd, you know, jump up and get angry. And we brought out this amazing chemistry.
That's so cool, man.
And, you know, not to put myself over or him over, but in all honesty, you know, I think that was a big part too with Neo. We caught lightning in a bottle.
100%.
Him and I writing, you know,
100%.
You finding yourself, Jer finding, like Showtime Eric Young finding himself,
so
Crazy Steve coming
man.
up. Like, it was lightning in a bottle.
Yep.
And I, to this day, believe if we had internet or any of that back then, because we were dinosaurs, you know, we had one video camera on the whole team that, you know, can you get me a copy of that? We were ahead of our time.
100%, man.
We were ahead of our time. And Jess was a huge part of that vision.
And I think it's the cool thing is more and more people are learning about the legacy of Neo, and that's a legacy that Jesse was very, very proud of, and it will never die.
I just had this conversation literally with somebody downstairs. They made a comment on how nice the belts were, and I don't know if people have ever zoomed in on a picture of the Neo titles. So a lot of different federations, they just go on High Spots or wherever, and they buy their belt, and here, you know, here's your belt, wear it out there, thanks.
Sure.
Jess put a lot of thought in ours.
Yes,
so there's two side plates beside the names that I don't know if people have ever looked, but one is the FSPW logo, and then the other one is the Neo logo. And it was funny because the FSPW logo was like this guy with his arms outstretched, and here I am taking on the world, which is what we felt like, because everybody told us it wouldn't work. What we were doing, you can't take a bunch of, like you said, 130-pound kids and make people come to these shows. And we're like, yeah, we will. And we're going to make them stars in Niagara Falls. And we did.
Yes, you did.
And, you know, then when a couple of workers and the guy that was in charge of the boxing club decided they could do it better, they stole it out from behind Jess and I. So Jess went out east for a little while, and I heard he had came back, so I called him. I said, "Buddy, you got to meet me for coffee." And he was still hot at everything, so he came in, and I said, "What if we just take it back?" And he's like, "How?" And I'm like, "We just take it back. We just tell everybody on the show to believe in us again." And I said, "That's where you got to come in, because you're a better talker than I am." I said, and we convinced them that we're going to run under a different name. We get everybody on board, and nobody's going to work for anybody but us. And Jess, being Jess, started schmoozing everybody, and that's
everybody
when
drink the Kool-Aid.
And that's when Neo came to be, and that's why that's why the logo for Neo was the guy with his back turned.
Right.
Because Joe came up with that, because we turned our back on everybody again.
And just decided we're doing this.
When he showed me those belts, they are the heaviest belts.
Yeah, man.
History-wise, that I think I've seen.
Yeah.
You know?
He was so proud. He sent me a picture of that right as soon as it got made. He just sent me a picture. And I was like, "Oh my God, Jess, this is so beautiful." And he's like, "I can't stop looking at it, man."
He was so excited that I had to be a jerk, because there was one picture that was whatever country they were made in. I asked him if he was making them in his garage.
Right.
Because I'm like, "Are those your fingers in the top, like gluing in the..." And he got all hot at me, and he's like, "How dare you disrespect my belts? What are you doing?"
Oh, man. Well, I appreciate your time, man. I appreciate
thank you for
sharing
asking.
these stories. These are amazing. I'm learning. This has been a really therapeutic process for me, actually, just sitting down with guys and giving guys a forum to share. And I've learned, I mean, so much about my own history through these stories, and then also things that I things I knew about Jesse, but like this has really put a microscope on so many traits of him, that of who he truly was as a man. And if we can all together help the world know that amazingness that he was a little bit more, then I'm so happy to be able to do that. And I've been able to do that with all my friends here.
The one thing I've said is to find somebody in the wrestling industry that absolutely nobody, 0 people can say anything bad about is near impossible.
That's right. It is
near impossible in this business because it's backstabbing and cutthroat and everything else. It's a great television show. And to find a person that has the respect and just the love that people felt for Jesse Scott is unheard of. And I don't think you'll find another person anywhere in professional wrestling that can say they have no enemies in what is a dirty, cutthroat business. 100%. And I think that speaks volumes about the man. Like he was just love and funny and magic. And somebody asked me for a newspaper article once to describe him. I'm like, you know, I had to steal a line from The Warriors, one of my favorite movies. I was like, how do you describe Jesse Scott? I was like, magic. Just a whole lot of magic.
That's right, man. You could say it better myself. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
I love you, brother.
Love you too.
That brings us to the conclusion of our tribute episodes for our dear friend Jesse Scott. These episodes have been extremely therapeutic for me as I've processed the loss of my friend. I've learned a lot about Jesse from these conversations. And really, I've learned a lot about life and what's really important by having these conversations. But the tribute and the stories don't need to end here. I encourage everyone to continue to share their Jesse stories with the world. Jesse has left behind an amazing legacy in the wrestling business and with his beautiful family. One of the ways that legacy will live on is through the stories that we continue to share. May these podcast episodes act as a starting off point for inspiring you to share your own Jesse Scott stories with the world. It is also my hope that these episodes can be something that his family and friends can come back to over the years to re-listen to some stories about Jesse and to constantly be reminded of the amazing human being Jesse was. Jesse, thank you for everything you've done for me, for making my life better in so many ways. I love you, brother.
Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life is wrestling.